Hello, my name is Kristal Sotomayor. I'm the programming director of the Philadelphia Latino Film Festival. Thank you for joining us for this emergence panel in collaboration with Film Fatales. So before we get too deep into it, I'm going to hand it off to Film Fatales founder Leah Meyerhoff for an introduction.
Hi, thanks so much, Kristal. My name is Leah, founder of Film Fatales, a nonprofit that advocates for parity in film and supports a membership community of over 1,000 feature film and television directors of all marginalized genders, including today's filmmakers. Film Fatales is a nonprofit and talent discovery platform for feature film and television directors. We recommend marginalized creators for jobs, funding opportunities, film festival screenings, and distribution through our Parity Pipeline platform. We uplift the next generation of filmmakers through Fatales Forward, our mentorship program, and we amplify the work of our community through our weekly speaker series of panel discussions, workshops, and mixers, including this conversation today. Thanks again so much for hosting and enjoy the conversation. Back to you, Kristal.
Thank you so much, Leah. We're so happy to be collaborating together on this panel. So we will be joining a group of filmmakers, and we're going to be talking about the experiences of women and non-binary filmmakers in the industry. So we're going to start off by having each of them give a brief introduction. So we're going to start off with Chitra.
Hi, I'm Chitra. I'm the director and producer of the documentary Foreign Puzzle. Foreign Puzzle is my first feature-length documentary. It was something that I started when I was doing my MFA at University of Texas in Austin, and filmed as an extension of that over 2 years, and going through a long edit process. And I'm so excited to be talking about the project and the production journey with everyone here at Film Fatales and the festival.
Hi, I'm Emily. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Coney-Bañez. I'm the director producer of Fruits of Labor. Please, to learn more about the film, look us up at www.fruitsoflaborfilm.com, and you can follow us on social media. And I'm just really excited to be a part of the conversation today.
Lorena.
Hi, I'm Lorena Manriquez, and I'm the director producer of Siqueiros Walls of Passion. The film is still streaming on the World Channel on PBS, and I'm really excited that's going to be shown in Philadelphia at the Philadelphia Latino Film Festival. I'm going to soon be launching our website for Andes Media LLC, and this is my second feature documentary. Thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Raquel Cepeda. I have a documentary that I wrote, produced, and directed called La Madrina, The Savage Life of Lorene Padilla, that I'm very excited to have screening at your festival. And if you want to learn more about it, you can go to www.lamadrinadoc.com.
My name is Angela Tucker. I'm a filmmaker based in New Orleans. I make social issue work both in the narrative and documentary space. And I'm on this panel to talk about the producing work that I did on Belly of the Beast.
Thank you all for being here. This is truly such a privilege to speak to all of you. I guess we will just be moving forward with questions. And I think, Leah, since you're also here, if you would like to answer some of these questions, I think that could also provide a wonderful insight because you're also a really talented filmmaker. So my first question is, how did you get started in filmmaking? And anybody can feel free to jump in.
I can go. Filmmaking was, it was long road home. I was a physical therapist. I was practicing for over 10 years. And I happened to be at this event where there was a filmmaker trying to raise money, like all of us are now, for a documentary about a river water dispute in a state in India where I come from. And it seemed so, the way she was talking about it seemed like money was the only obstacle. And with complete naivety, I was like, I'm going to fund this project. And that's really how I got into filmmaking. And quickly I realized that filmmaking was anything but simple and fundraising was anything but what we think it to be. And that's really what got me started. I went to film school, did everything wrong, and then kind of been on this discovery journey.
So I can say, I also had a kind of circuitous path. I did a doctorate in anthropology and just didn't ever think that I could do a career in film. I thought it was like out of reach. So it took me a while to make that decision. I was always filming. I had done a film called Bodies at War that had it was about landmine survivors in Colombia, and circulated a lot in Colombia and then universities and medical institutions here in the US. But I was really doing that as kind of an academic and not really understanding how to work in the industry. So Fruits of Labor for me is like the first kind of breakout, I guess you could say, in the industry where it's getting more recognition, and it's had a great festival run, and it'll have a POV broadcast in October. And yeah, it's been a great wild ride, and I'm just thrilled to be a part of this community that I really, really love.
I guess I'll go next. I started as a music journalist back in the day. I used to write for The Voice and all the papers that I really loved, and I always liked telling stories. And I focused on hip hop and classic salsa music. And I was, like totally thinking that I was just going to be a journalist. And then, I was like, you know what? I want to tell stories, but I want to tell stories in a larger format. So when I was magazine editor, I took the leap when I kind of could see where the industry was going, and made my first film produced by MTV Network's VH1 in the UN called Bling a Planet Rock, about hip hop's obsession with diamonds and how that intersected the war in Sierra Leone, which was kind of a difficult first film to make back in 2007, which aired on VH1 and other places internationally. And I got into film because I wanted to tell stories from a point of view of people that are very marginalized. I didn't go to film school. I know how to tell stories, and I'm part of the community that I document. And I wanted to be able to celebrate and tell stories about characters in their fullness without having to ascribe to respectability politics or think about white intervention when I was making them. So whether as an author or as a podcaster, as a filmmaker, I've always wanted to make sure that, we allow people to be in their fullness, you encourage that, and just contribute to this very rich cultural quilt of American narratives and documentary.
I can go next. So I started my journey as a documentary filmmaker when I was living in Mississippi. I was working as a civil engineer at the time. I had 2 young daughters, and I had a story to tell. I felt, it was a very personal story about my family in the aftermath of the dictatorship of Pinochet in Chile in the 70s and beyond. So yeah, I think just the urge of having to tell a story is what got me into documentary filmmaking, and always telling stories that had to be told, that hadn't been told, and also I think it's important to tell our own stories as people of color and women, stories that not necessarily other people will tell. So yeah, that's how I got going. And then that my first film was Ulysses Odyssey. That was my personal film. And then I made a couple of shorts, again about stories that had to be told, or I felt that I had to tell. And then Siqueiros Walls of Passion, which will be screening at the festival.
To go way, 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 way back, a brief story is that when I was 16, I was president of Amnesty International chapter in my high school. And we would do all this organizing and have people sign these petitions. And one time we had people sign petitions around this film that was showing at a film forum called The Thin Blue Line, which is really aging myself, by Errol Morris. And so we would go there, we would have people sign the petitions. And it was all about this man, Randall Adams, who is on death row for a crime that he didn't commit. And ultimately, Randall was released from prison. And that sort of, I don't know, the rush of that and the rush of just like playing such an important role in that just gave me the bug and let me see the power that media has over people's lives. So I think that's when I understood the power of film as a particular media. I've always been a storyteller, but film specifically, that experience kind of gave me the bug.
Leah, would you like to also respond to this question? Or if not, that's totally fine.
Yeah, sure. I think like a lot of us, I believe in the power of storytelling and authentic storytelling. I think out of all the art forms, cinema is a tool for empathy, and it's an opportunity for audiences to step outside of their bubble and experience the world through someone else's perspective and someone else's point of view. And so for the same reasons that I personally became a filmmaker, to see more stories that reflected my own existence on screen, I also dedicate a good amount of time to supporting other filmmakers, because I think, now more than ever is the time for transformative change and for folks in power to step aside and let folks on the margins step forward. And I envision a world in which women and non-binary filmmakers, gender non-conforming, filmmakers of color, disabled filmmakers, kind of all of us who have been on the outskirts of creating these narratives move to the center, because filmmakers are really the myth makers of our modern culture. And it is important for all of us to see perspectives that we historically have not been able to see.
I completely agree. And that's a great segue for my next question, because I think it's important to create a new future, but to also remember our ancestors. And I think that that's a theme that runs through so many of the films that we see here today, the ancestors, the people that have lifted us up. And so I wanted to ask, have there been women or non-binary people in the industry that have supported your growth, and how you have potentially also facilitated somebody else's growth as a filmmaker as well?
Yeah, well, I feel like we all stand on the shoulders of giants, and there's many ancestors in terms of the living ones. For me, Aurora Guerrero was very important for my first step into saying, hey, she told me about Nalip. I'm like, can I do this thing? I really don't like academia. And she's like, come to Nalip. And she gave me a lot of initial introductions to this world. And so that was a real lift up. And then, of course, Brown Girls Doc Mafia was a really big stepping stone for discovery and figuring out. And I went to a lot of festivals, conferences, and as I used my anthropology skills to really just listen to how people talk and how the industry works, to see then how I could maneuver it and to tell stories. And then Film Fatale has just been awesome and lifting all of us up here. And then in terms of other filmmakers, I have a paid internship program in my with my film company. So they're all first gen college students from mixed documented status, and I'm proud to say they've all graduated from college now and can continue working with them. So we've really created a support group to make sure, sometimes there'd be phone calls with tears and my professor doesn't understand me and this and that. So it was, they all majored in film. And then, of course, Ashley, who's the protagonist, is also, she's figuring out her career path, but she is exploring film as an option.
And I sort of, continuing on what Emily's saying, it's like, I feel like it's like with women, right? It's like these chain links. There are these, there are countless people that that have supported, my growth in the industry, whether it is mentors from college or people that I worked with, or these different or organizations like Brown Girls, like, or New Day Films or Film Fatales, or when we go to these events. Like I remember remember when I started working on the current project I'm working on, I went to Southern artist convening in Durham. And when you go to these events, right, at every stage, whether it is at fundraising or writing your proposal, there are so many mentors in the industry that are giving to us, and I think it's also our role, like whether it comes to the students I have taught or to people that are starting out, to sort of pay it forward. And I think it's in doing that we are able to sort of sustain and live in an industry that is inherently not sustainable or not keeping things easy for women and non-binary folks. So I think part of the survival is to take and to give, and to keep doing that in the process of creating content.
Yeah, I can add to that. I think it's really important for us women, and to be able to to pay it forward. I think that's really important to recognize films that are told by one of us, and help them and be the champion for those films, whether you're sitting at the funder's desk, and making those decisions at panel, and when you see a wonderful film, and the filmmaker, that this film is going to be wonderful, and made by a woman, and a woman of color sometimes. I think it's really important that we're there at that table, because someone was there before us, rooting for us and for our film to be granted those funds. So I think it's important. And then it's also important to speak up when you see that films that are being given funds that really shouldn't be, or I'm not going to get into, but that are really not worth, or they're telling, or people that are telling stories about people of color that are not part of that community. I think you really have to be really fierce and kind of bring that up, because sometimes people don't see it that way. So, but for me, I have a lot of madrinas, godmothers in this business, and I am so grateful to so many of them that have really pushed me. Just like Emily, my career really started at NALIP. At the time, NALIP was, the executive director was a woman, and I'm indebted to her. Catherine Galan was really wonderful from the very beginning, and then every madrina that I met had something to do with NALIP. I met in NALIP conference, and thereafter, and of course now I'm a member of the Femme Fatale, and I love it. It's a wonderful community, and I think it's so important to help each other. That women, we really need to be together in this and push forward. It's not easy, but if together, I think la fuerza, la unidad es la fuerza. We just gotta keep on moving forward.
Well, I would say it depends on whether a film is budgeted or if it's a passion project, whether I can bring somebody on or not. But usually when something is like my last film, La Madrina, it was a passion project. But I intend to find my mentors and the people that give me life, mostly in my own community, outside of film. For me, it's just worked out that way. I love Femme Fatales, and I'm so excited to be part of the organization, but I usually exist outside of the bubbles. I've never been in any clique or any mix. For me, my biggest inspiration is the folks that, that reared me, and people that give me advice. And even it's funny, with La Madrina, she herself has become somebody who's like, you got to continue doing this. You got to continue doing this. And sometimes when I feel like, don't get a grant, or if I'm feeling like tired, or I'm feeling stuck creatively on a new film that I'm working on now, I'll go there and hang out with some of the women that were in that film and just, you know, lay back and talk about storytelling. You know what I mean? So I think it's important to stay connected to your community. And I would say that also, I really try my hardest to, when I'm in the community, like I'm also a boxer. So I'll get like folks that are, you know, female boxers that I know to come in and like, you know what a PA is? Let's try to do this in case, you know, the going pro thing doesn't work out. Or I try to really, you know, even if I'm directing something, talk to everybody on set, whether it's a small one or a big one, to really see how they're doing, how they're getting along, and try to bring them along with me. And every little small thing I can do, I think that, you know, it helps push it forward. And then sometimes if I do have something that's budgeted, I will try my hardest to have as many women on the team as possible. And I was working on a series that I actually walked away from because, as Jay Balvin says, my ethics are non-negotiable. And neither was my teams that had an entirely female almost crew and post-production crew. So, you know, you got to keep on trying, you know, it's all about falling down 7 times and getting back up 8 and staying committed.
Yeah, I'd like to add to what Raquel is saying in terms of economic thing, right? Like anytime there's funding, the intentionality of making sure that it is kind of shared with the community, but also it kind of feeds itself forward, right? When you know that if you're able to do that, it kind of brings in a strong team, then the intention to find the resources to make that happen, or to be like, hey, yes, I can do this if it's a passion project, but then making that extra effort to find the resources, right? It kind of feeds that intention and energy to do that, because the more you are able to bring that resource in, you're able to expand what can happen, and also go beyond the, you know, at one level, like when I started doing it, it was about survival and it's about creating something and having something where I'm directing, to now where I'm like thinking, hey, there can be a bigger team, that if there's more resources, the creativity and the visual executions can get better. So it sort of really, the more we kind of lean in, hold up and lift up, the better what we make also becomes.
Wow. Well, in terms of ancestors, I would definitely have to mention my mother, who has passed away, but like was somebody who believed in me and my ability to tell stories just from a really, really young age. Like, she didn't treat my desire to be a storyteller as like, oh, that's so cute, little kids telling stories. Like, she really treated me like I was gonna tell great stories and I could do anything I wanted. And so I think that getting that confidence from her at such a young age really gave me the power and the strength to be able to be in such a crazy industry, because, you know, having that support, and, you know, it wasn't like we grew up with any examples of that or with any money. I definitely try to work with as many young people as I can, and I try to compensate them for that work. So that's a real, like, you know, trying to pay a livable wage and having diverse people work on all of the projects that I work on. And also, you know, I get a lot of, you know, emails of people wanting to pick my brain, and I can't do it with everyone, but I will say that if it's a woman of color, I will really make the time to do that. So that's definitely one way. And then I'm also a professor at Tulane University. So through all of those things, though teaching at Tulane, I don't really work with as many diverse people as I'd like to, which is part of why I try to hire as many diverse people as I can.
So my last question, because you are all such amazing filmmakers and you give back so much to the community and really uplifting, you know, women and non-binary filmmakers. So what advice do you have for someone who is emerging, who's interested in the industry and wants to get their foot in?
Yeah, so what I can say to that is there's, you know, a lot of it's persistence. And I'd like to say, you know, maybe your first stab at doing things, it doesn't maybe it doesn't go anywhere even, but like as long as you can learn from each thing that you're doing and just stay in the game, it's gonna happen, you know, and that you and that you're focusing on the specifics and the stories that you can tell and that you want to tell and you feel you need to tell. Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest one. And then for me, having support was really important. So, you know, finding groups was really helpful, like Brown Girls Doc Mafia in the beginning and things like that, because then I got access to spaces that I wouldn't have had access to before, because it can be expensive to network and do all these things. And then, you know, things like Film Fatal and all these other groups, you know, it can be important to help your network and people. We can all support each other, as another filmmaker was saying here. So, and it's so important. We're all part of that community. So yeah, persistence. Um, you know, there's more than one film in your journey. So just keep going. That's what I would say.
I think listening to that voice in the back of your head and trusting that is important. And I also think being attached to the process and the people and less to the product, because this is not, you know, the film is important, but what we are doing to make that film and thinking beyond the transactional and being perceptive to what the story is going to be, because these stories live forever. Like, you know, the film stays beyond your existence, and the people we meet and the relationships we build in those things, they are with us. Because I don't make investigative documentaries. I'm talking about I'm making intimate stories about people, and those relationships live beyond the production time. And so putting value into that process and the people and being less attached to the product, because the product will be what it will be, and there'll be many of those to make. So, and I think looking back, if there's one thing I would tell myself, is to constantly listen to that voice in the back of the head, because 9 out of 10 times it is probably the right thing.
I would say really work on developing a thick skin, and, you know, and not looking at rejection as a negative thing. Whether it be a rejection, you know, not getting a grant, or you know, not finding the first producer, you know, like a producer right away, or somebody to work with, or a team, or a DP, or like, everything is not meant to exist in a very Pollyannish way. It's just not meant to be. Humans are not constructed that way, and we just have to, as filmmakers, you know, be super tenacious and dedicated to the story. And I would say also to go in with an intention, but allow the story to tell you, and listen to the story and let the story tell you what it wants to be. Because once that relationship is built between you and the story and the editor in the room, I mean, it's magic, and it's worth all the rejection. It's worth everything. It's worth all the tears.
For me, it's I think that the advice would be, think of it as a marathon and not a sprint. I think it's really important to be there for the long run, and the perseverance and the, you know, getting up every time you get that rejection letter. Keep them, but, you know, just go back to it and think, oh my gosh, this is just, you know, it was just a learning experience. I think we have to learn every time. And, you know, it took me 10 years to make my first feature documentary. I told myself it's going to take me a lot less on the second one, and that was fully funded. But it took me another 10 years. You know, on average, a documentary takes 7 years. So patience, persistence, believe in yourself, believe in your film, and take it to the very end. That's what I can say.
I would echo all of that, and then some. That, you know, the best advice I ever got when I was starting out was from Kim Pierce, and it was to not wait for someone to come along and give you permission, to give yourself permission. And I think that still rings really true, that this is such a long game, and in not tying your self-worth to your art and learning to enjoy that process, because it is a roller coaster, and sticking with it and building your tribe and building your community, since it's a collaborative art form. Like, those are the filmmakers who if you have that passion to tell your story and you do it one way or other, no matter what.
I would add to really just have faith and a belief that you have a unique story and a unique vision. I think it took me a really long time to understand that, because, you know, we're in these spaces where there's kind of a certain kind of perspective that is prioritized, or a certain kind of filmmaking, or, you know, like essentially like white guys, is we've all learned film through that lens, and then have had to seek out other kinds of filmmakers and filmmaking. So I think it's just think about what makes you unique, really like hone in on that. I threw a lot of just trial and error and making work, but also deep thinking and journaling and all of that. Like figure out, okay, this is what makes me unique. This is the kind of story I want to tell. This is what's missing in the industry. That's also important. And if you kind of come from that place, you're always going to be making something that's unique and that speaks to you. Like I have lots of different interests, and I think those projects come to me, like Belly of the Beast came to me through, you know, my knowledge about forced sterilizations just as a Black woman in this country. Always feeling like that hasn't been highlighted in the way that it needs to be. And that really drew me to the project.
Thank you all so much for coming and for being here and for giving such thoughtful responses. You know, I'm sure everybody learned a lot from this panel. I learned so much. And so thank you all so much. Please check out the rest of the Philadelphia Latino Film Festival. Check us out at PHLAFF.org and learn more. Thank you. Bye.